Welcome back, and thank you again for joining us on the Football Discussion Podcast. This is Colby Cummings. Today we're going to kick off part 2 of playing football on spreadsheets. Today's topic, we're going to talk about if you should be going for it on fourth down, and after you score a touchdown, should you be going for a 2-point conversion or just taking the extra point? This is something that the analytics community has so much to say about, so much research has been done on this. I definitely find it to be an interesting topic and one I can't wait to get started on.
Now, you can also be too reckless, but you can also be too cautious. This is called the timid approach to life. And my caution was always the risk. Risk used to drive me right up the wall. I used to say, what if this happens?
So should you be risky and go for it on fourth down, or should you punt and leave your trust in the defense? Today we're going to talk about it and break it down. Like I mentioned in part 1 of this series, analytics is all math-based. It uses past data to try and predict the future, and obviously there is no certainty in this. Obviously, when it's all math-based and theory-based, nothing is going to be certain. It's obviously not perfect, far from it. But so are so many other walks of life, whether it's investing in the stock market, looking to place a bet on a team you think is going to win tonight, or whether you're checking the weather report to see if it's going to rain tomorrow at your kid's birthday party. It all comes down to math, science, probabilities, and what we can expect to happen. At the end of the day, it's all a guess, but we like to use numbers to support our decisions. In theory, if you flip a coin 100 times, you should get 50 heads, 50 tails, but when you actually conduct the experiment, the chances of you getting exactly 50 and 50 aren't very high, but if you have a large enough sample size, the idea is that you will regress to the mean, and eventually you will end up with 50% landing on each outcome. That's the theory behind analytics, is if you follow the averages, you can predict what your outcomes should be in the future, and they should help support your decision making. The thing that I find really interesting about the analytics is that you have to follow them blindly for them to truly work. If you do want to end up at that average, you have to follow them all the time. You can't just pick and choose when you think it's convenient, when you agree with the analytics that you'll follow them. You have to follow them 24/7 for them to actually work. If the analytics suggest that you have an over 50% chance to convert, you have to follow them all the time because there are going to be times where you don't convert. But if you follow them enough, you will, again, regress back to the mean, and the mean suggests that you will be successful more times than not. It really is a sample size problem. The more times you follow the analytics, the more it's supposed to work out in your favor over the long term. So what do the analytics say about your fourth down decisions? On 4th and 1, they tell you to go for it any place on the field that it's possible once you get to your own 9-yard line. Obviously, that's not going to sit well with people. They have that fear of, well, what if we don't get it? It's basically an easy touchdown or a field goal best case scenario for the other team. The analytics also say on 4th and 2, you should start going for it anywhere beyond your 28-yard line. On 4th and 3, you should go for it everywhere beyond your own 40. 4th and 5, anywhere on the field, it's about a 50-50 toss-up. And 4th and 6 is where you start having a less than 50% chance of converting. Obviously, when you hear these numbers out loud, it does seem kind of counterintuitive. It seems far too aggressive, and that it's ultimately going to bite you in the long run. But the logic is that in the long run, it'll eventually help you, and you'll end up being ahead by converting more often, giving yourself more possessions, more chances to score, to win games. And a lot of these decisions to go for it on fourth down are trying to increase your chances of win probability, while also increasing your expected points added. So expected points added, or EPA, is something that's been popping up a lot more. You see it all over Twitter. Obviously, Ben Baldwin is kind of the godfather for this stuff. He constantly uses it in all of his measures of quarterback play, decision-making for coaches. So I'll give you a brief synopsis of what expected points added is. So expected points added is really the difference between the expected points from one play to the very next play. You're a lot less likely to score from your own 20-yard line as you are to score from the opponent's 20-yard line. So say you have a big play where you gain 60 yards, let's say, you have a much higher chance of scoring on the next play. So the expected points added on that play would be very high because you went from a low probability of scoring points to a much higher probability of scoring points on the next play. So basically what this stat is trying to measure is how effective is any individual play in terms of adding points to the board, which is obviously the way you're going to win games in the NFL. So hypothetically, say you were on your own 40-yard line, you're 60 yards from the end zone, you have a punt that nets around 37 yards. That's going to give the opponent a first down from their own 23. What EPA spits out at us is that your opponent actually gained half a point of expected points and you lost half a point. So what it ultimately is doing is punting the ball away is helping your opponent, and that's what the analytics is arguing, is that you shouldn't be punting, you should be going for it, and that's going to increase your chances of winning. That's why you see so many of the analytics people hating on coaches for their decision making, being far too conservative, not taking risk, not looking at increasing their win probability and expected points added. Win probability is a really complicated formula. I'm not going to get into it too much, but some of the factors that are involved in it are the Vegas line, how much time is left in a game, the down and distance, field position. Those are some of the main contributing factors to what affects win probability. So when it comes down to the decision whether to punt or not to punt, the win probability with all the factors I just listed, those are an important piece of the decision making. And the analytics community really likes to follow what's going to increase your win probability the most. So where do I stand on going for it on fourth down, blindly following the analytics? As difficult as it is to get on board with blindly following numbers, I do have to agree with the analytics community here. I really do think it is best for teams to be more aggressive, start going for it on fourth down. You're only going to get so many possessions in a game. You need to try and score as many points as you can, as efficiently as you can. But it's only going to work if you follow it all the time. You can't just follow it sometimes. Like I talked about earlier, if you want to be at the mean, which say is 55% for going for it on 4th and 3, you have to go for it on every 4th and 3 when the analytics say that you should be going for it. You have to follow it. Just can't do it conveniently. So I am urging NFL coaches, please be more aggressive. I know that it's tough to get on board with, but it's what's best for the team. It's what's going to help you score more points. It's what's going to help you win games. NFL coaches have kind of lagged behind the analytics community in terms of aggressiveness. Obviously, NFL coaches, they do have more at stake. They have to answer for all their decisions. But I do think that these math models are complicated, but they are also effective. I think if coaches would follow them more often, they would be better served. It's just going to take a little bit longer than they might want for them to see the results. Again, you need a large enough sample size for you to regress to the mean and come out on top more times than not by following the analytics. So now I've gone for it on fourth down. I've scored a touchdown. Now the decision, do I go for 2 or do I just take the easy, used to be easy, not so much anymore, extra point? The probability of converting an extra point is about 95%. The probability of converting a 2-point conversion is actually about half of that with twice the reward. So you would think that it's ultimately a wash and that you might as well just take the safe route instead of going for 2. But once again, the analytics community, they strongly disagree with this logic. They will argue that NFL coaches' most common and significant mistakes come when they're not going for 2 when they're down 4 or 8 points or when they're down 11 late in games. These are times when they feel NFL coaches should be aggressive, go for 2, and here are the reasons why. The logic behind going for 2 when you're down 8 points after scoring a touchdown with the extra point pending, you should go for 2 because the difference between being down 7 points versus 6 points is a much greater difference than being down 7 versus 8 if you don't convert the 2-point conversion. These are decisions that are based around increasing your win probability in regulation and not playing for overtime. Another scenario where analytics community is going to argue that you should be going for 2 is when you've scored a touchdown and you were down 4 points. This again is based around the win probability because if you go for 2 and then you were ultimately down 2 points, you have a much better chance of winning because you can kick a game-winning field goal versus if you just take the extra point and you're down 3. It's ultimately like playing for overtime, and the goal should be to win the game in regulation because once you get to overtime, it's fairly random. The better team might not actually win. So winning in regulation should be teams' goals. You have a better chance, more control over winning in regulation versus what's going to happen in overtime. It's often very random. The analytics community also argues that if you score a touchdown and you're down 2, that you should go for 2 and look to tie it up because there's much more value in that extra point pretty much at any time in the game, but especially in the third quarter and beyond. And looking at situations where a team is actually leading and considering going for 2, the analytics support that teams should be going for 2 when they're up 5 or 8 early on in games, so they'd be looking to go up 7 or 10. The advantage here is a little bit smaller, but it's definitely something that coaches should still be following if they're looking to increase their win probability even early in games. Now say a team has scored a touchdown and they're down 9 points. There's a case that they should be going for 2 because being down 8, you know that you will eventually have to go for 2 anyways, and it's better to know going into the rest of the game what your decision is going to be like, how you're going to have to play the game, and what's going to be needed to try and win. Some teams would rather just kick the extra point and be down 8, but what that fails to include is if the other team gets the ball and they don't go down and kick a field goal, and now you're down 11 and it's back to 2 possessions, and you're going to have to score 2 touchdowns no matter what to win in regulation. So in this situation, you're going to need a 2-point conversion either way, so you might as well just go for it earlier, and that way you can adjust your game plan accordingly. The one weird case we see with the 2-point conversion debate is that when a team scores late and they narrow the game to 1 point, you can kick the extra point and play for overtime, or you can go for 2 and try and win the game in regulation when there's seemingly no time left on the clock. This is one where coaches have actually traditionally gone for 2 to win the game. Even though the analytics don't even support this decision, they think it's smarter in this situation to actually kick the extra point because you have a better chance of winning a game in overtime than you do converting a 2-point conversion. Again, this is all math and probability based. It's basically taking past data and looking to extrapolate that to the future to make predictions about what we can expect to happen. So a lot of this is going to be logic that goes against what people traditionally believe. But the analytics people, they follow the math, they follow the numbers, and that's what those numbers, these are the decisions that they support. So as far as the going for 2 debate, I will jump on board again with the analytics, like you'll hear me do often throughout this series. I do support the math nerds on this one. Your goal needs to be to score as many points as you can. Yes, you don't want to be over-aggressive, but like earlier in the show on the soundbite, you don't want to be too timid. You need to increase the amount of points you can as efficiently as you can. Taking an extra point for 1 point or having a play from the 2-yard line to be able to get 2 points, I think there's way more value in going for 2. The numbers support it. I support it. I think teams should be looking to go for 2 way more often unless a game situation suggests that the 1 point, and the analytics also support that the 1 point is more valuable at that point in time. I think win probability, even though it's not perfect, I do think it is something that NFL coaches should start taking into consideration when they make their decisions, whether to go for 4th down, whether to go for 2 or kick an extra point, whether to kick a field goal, whether to punt, these types of important game decisions, clock management decisions, field possession games versus, high-scoring shootout games. Coaches need to start looking at these things more to make the best decisions that are going to increase their chances to win. It's not easy, however, because these are the type of decisions that can get you fired. The fan base can turn on you very quickly. The players themselves can turn on you if you're making decisions that they don't like or they don't agree with because they go against conventional wisdom. So ultimately, you have to have 2 decisions. You either have to follow the analytics all the time so eventually they work out, or you have to go against them and just trust your gut every time. Personally, I think math is a great thing. It's dialed down to a science. It's something that we should follow, something we can make very good use of, and it can be used to a team's advantage to help themselves increase their chances of winning over the long term. So yes, as much as I love old school coaches, I love the Bill Parcells, the Bill Belichicks of the world, I do have to jump on board with the analytics nerds here. I do think they're doing great work. I support a lot of what they're doing. I understand that it's not perfect. It's a work in progress, but it's getting better and better, day by day. And I think in the future, more coaches are going to have to take this into consideration. They're going to have an analytics department. With all the resources, and technology that we have nowadays, this is a good thing, and it's something that coaches need to get on board with. It's going to be part of the future. And so they're either going to have to jump on or they're going to be left in the dust. So let's add a little bit of excitement to the game. Let's start going for it on 4th down. Take the kickers off the field. I don't watch football for kickers. Start going for 2 more often. It's more exciting. I want the best players on the field. And not only is it more exciting, it is actually the right decision if you want to follow the numbers and increase your chances to win. Coaches, you are here for a good time, not a long time. So start being more aggressive. Make the game more exciting. As a fan, I will thank you. As an analytics supporter, I will also thank you. No, football is not played on spreadsheets. It is played in stadiums on Sundays. That being said, still very pro analytics. So thanks for joining me on part 2 of this series, playing football on spreadsheets. Part 3, we're going to dive into how we should be looking and measuring quarterback play. And we're also going to talk about the establish the run debate. Are running backs important? Are they worth paying? And is the run game what it once was? So thanks again for joining us on the Football Discussion Podcast. This is Colby Cummings signing out. Always remember, go for it on 4th down. Go for 2. Live fast, die young. Keep the game interesting. Thanks for listening.